Sheila, can I run that wire now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's,
You're on.
you know, like the new, sometimes
Do a
it's like,
presentation.
it's so simple.
But you're on.
People just-
Calling order the city council meeting of April 26, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mr. Noel?
Here.
Ms. Atrox?
Here.
Ms. Weltman?
Here.
Mr. Daga? Mr. Lemay?
Here.
Mr. Gentili? Dr. Wong?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our visiting audience tonight. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first agenda item, council, is for the reappointment of Amy Miller to the Civil Service Commission. Amy has been beautifully serving on our Civil Service Commission for an unexpired term. That term has now come to a conclusion, and we need to reappoint her. And I've spoken to Amy about it, and she is happy to serve, and I hope that if she could break away, she'd be here this evening. But anyway, I would request a motion to reappoint Amy to the Civil Service Commission.
Questions after that?
Sure.
When we, do we ever advertise for this opening, so Civil Service Commission? How do we find people and when there's a vacancy and opening?
The vacancies are so rare and in between. I can't remember who Amy replaced.
She, Dan Carter replaced Jerry Chapman.
Oh, Jerry passed away. That was it. So, no, we do not advertise for it. It's an unpaid position. I made inquiries to several people in the community. Amy has a family history in law enforcement, a big interest in it, and
It's not that, I'm just
No.
curious the process and whether
No.
getting more
it's
citizens.
simply a mayor nomination, and council then confirms an appointment.
What are the duties of the Civil Service Commission?
Civil Service Commission, I'll maybe let Mr. Byron add to this. Basically, from time to time, they need to authorize a testing process for our civil service. All of our police and fire are civil service.
Right.
So we run a test. We changed the testing protocol several years ago. And after we are right now engaged in a police test, and hope to get some good candidates out of it for some open positions. And when the list is scored, then the Civil Service Commission will approve the list. There will be a meeting where they confer with the chiefs, and the chiefs, explain the process that just occurred, presents a list of candidates who have scored on the test, and the commission determines whether to accept the list or not.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Noel?
Yes.
Ms. Atrox?
Yes.
Ms. Weltman?
Yes.
Mr. Lemay?
Yes.
Dr. Wong?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have a somewhat abbreviated agenda this evening. We will hear from our committees. I believe the only committee that has met since we were last together a week ago was the Road and Infrastructure Committee, and it was a good committee meeting.
Wait.
What? Oh, you're not.
Finance
You're
Committee.
not here? It's just too exciting for me. Go ahead, for a minute. Mr. Lemay seems to want to go first. I defer to Mr. Little. No, you don't want to say it. Go ahead. Yes. Let's do it also, Matt. So what's for the finance committee, Mr. Lemay?
We did have a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight and went over the budget and expenditures year to date. Revenue expenditures are largely in line, if not somewhat under budget from an expenditure standpoint. Nothing unusual. The projects continue to be funded as we plan for them. And so a very strong performance so far. Good budgeting by Joe. Nothing else to report.
Thank you, Mr. Lemay. And my apologies for oversight of the meeting that I attended moments ago. Now I would love to turn.
I can't follow that.
Over to Mr. Little, who led our Road and Infrastructure Committee 2 days ago. So,
Yes,
Mr. Little?
and I actually have a little bit of video I'm going to show you a little later on because of something we discussed. So you can all see it a little bit more clearly if the area isn't, it's pretty familiar to everyone. So currently, we got a state of where our road projects are now, and Mr. Sheehy said we're bidding out South Woodland and Butterwing for resurfacing. It's just normal resurfacing projects. Shaker, we're waiting on the bidding, putting the bidding out for that until we know a little bit more about when they're going to be finished with their work. And at that time, put the bidding out because then the prices will be a little more consistent with the time because they've been fluctuating somewhat. Although the prices are kind of, Don says, staying up, unfortunately. We haven't seen a big drop in those prices. So, and that Shaker paving is all the way from where we are here all the way to Somme Center Road, and obviously all the work that's been done on that. We had a brief discussion on the Gates Mills Boulevard paths. As you know, last year the county dedicated $250,000 of its ARPA money to the construction of trailhead and other beautification of Gates Mills Boulevard. So those funds are still available for us, and we voted to accept them. But as you know, we were turned down for the ODNR money, and that was related to the fact that they believe that our paths connect with Mayfield Heights, and since Mayfield Heights took their money and didn't build the paths, then ODNR is saying, well, we're not gonna. I don't know if this is their reasoning, and that it's probably right that that's the reason they're doing it.
It is we scored, there's no reason we were not awarded that grant money other than, in my opinion, and I think Mr. Sheehy shares it, then the misperception at a minimum that our path somehow connects to the current unbuilt path for which Mayfield Heights was awarded, when in fact there are, literally more than a mile in between where those would be. And our path would directly connect to the paths in Beechwood, to Shaker, to Cleveland. So they're simply not understanding the geography and the picture. But we talked about that last week. I'm not going to go through it again.
Right. And so that's kind of the reality that we have to live with right now. So one of the, we're still looking at doing that beautification. And so that what we had done sort of in anticipation of that is to have our path connect to north up to Ursuline. And so we are still working on that. The mayor explained that we're working with state representatives and senator to perhaps get some state support for this project. So we're hoping it is going to go through, and I'm hopeful for that as well. So as you know, the survey showed a great deal of support for sidewalks. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss were where we should start beginning these sidewalks. And it all ties into a project that's been sitting there for a long time, and that's the circle at Chagrin and Lander, and improving that. And for for a long time, we haven't really known that it's been kind of up in the air as to what's going to happen with that with Beach Brook. And now that that is somewhat settled, it's time to look at that again. Right now, the circle is big. It allows you to drive through pretty quickly, and that in turn does not make it very conducive to get in and out. And that's one of the hangups with the traffic, as Don has explained to us on several occasions. Don has gone through, how many designs do you think you've gone through? It's changed as things change, right?
A handful of iterations for sure, yeah.
Right. So he's gone through a lot, but when we do that, it's going to have to deal with pedestrian traffic because there's going to be pedestrian traffic around there too, seeing as all the businesses that are around there. So one suggestion is that we start our sidewalk program with an area that is actually fairly buildable with the least amount of disruption. And I'm going to show you that in a second. And that is to take 422, which, as you know, is 4 lanes from the circle out to the high school, and take 2 of those lanes and make that the walkway to the school, and then take the other 2 lanes and make them now just a 2 lanes, 1 each way. And that would allow enhanced pedestrian access from the high school to Lander Chagrin. And if you'll take a look up there at the screen, I'll kind of show you through this. If you're looking straight down on the circle, on the left there's Morgan Park. So we're kind of facing right now southeast. And so you see that little triangle right there. As you know now, when you drive there, that is 2 lanes going one way, and where that car is, 2 lanes going the other way. The plan would be to take the southern lanes, those are the ones on the right, and turn them into this pedestrian walkway. And then the 2 lanes on the left, which are the northern lanes, would be 2-way traffic. Right there, you see what happens in front of the high school. Those 2 lanes was 2 lanes on each side, narrowed down to 1 lane. And so in essence, you would be going from that point all the way to the circle with 2 lanes of traffic, 1 going each way. And as we say, it all starts with the circle. So let's take a look at the circle too, because we all know what this looks like. It's got all the exits and entrances with all the businesses there. It's a big challenge for designing a big circle like that. As you can see, that large diameter allows people to go faster than they should. And also the way you're steered into that circle, there are people who literally go the wrong way on that because they want to get somewhere quickly. So the idea is to reduce the diameter, slow down the speed in the circle, but allow more traffic to flow easily. And it is possible, if everything falls into place, that we could be ready for construction in the construction season next year. But that will require negotiating with the businesses because this redesign is going to involve them and affect them. So that is pretty much what we discussed at Road and Infrastructure.
So I have some thoughts that I wanted to share. I attended the meeting, as you know. I didn't think I should probably speak because we would have made a quorum to vote as a community member. But I sat here and listened to it. I've heard chunks of this before. So one piece of information I think we're missing is the position of the school board. I have some experience with the position of the school board on this and school board policy, which is the school board does not support students taking, for example, riding bicycles or walking to school. It's actually in policy. It's a long established policy, and it's for multiple reasons, not just, what this would resolve, obviously. This wouldn't do it for Pepper Pike students or the broader community. So I have a lot of concerns. Also, the school, I think there have been some community members' comments that might have projected their personal opinion as opposed to what actually happens in the district. So students aren't really expected to walk, for example, it occasionally happens, but to Landerwood Plaza, for example. So that is something that's not an expectation. So if you're staying on campus, for example, after school, It's a fairly small window till your after-school activities. Students aren't really just supposed to be hanging out. And there were actually some small issues with students, just kind of hanging out at the library across the street. So I have, which were resolved, no problem. I mean, we have really great kids at Orange and it wasn't a big deal, but, maybe they were talking and they shouldn't be talking or whatever was happening in a library. So point being is, I guess I would say, I don't imagine that the school board's position would change, but I would say those are some conversations we should have with the district before we gave them a path that they don't want. And it actually in the past, so for example, it wasn't thought through, just as an example, when the library was put in across from the school, that they would have kids darting across the street. So at the expense of the district, pretty substantial expense, like I think either close to or possibly even above $100,000. The school district had to put in a crosswalk, do engineering studies, all that because they wanted the kids to be able to cross safely to use the library. Does every kid always cross at the sidewalk? Probably not, but that's the intention and the hope, and sidewalks were put in kind of to lead from the high school parking lot to get kids there. So one of my concerns is that on that portion of the project, that we really are thoughtful as to whether this is something the school wants or whether we're creating a problem for them. I don't see policy changing, like I said, because that the traffic is not the only reason, or this piece of traffic in Pepper Pike is not the only reason that that policy is in place. And we do also have door-to-door buses in the district. If anybody wants to talk offline why sometimes you see a child perhaps walking, I'm happy to, discuss some individual observations that I've learned of. Because there are issues in the community that we could all work on. But in general, that's the situation for Orange schools, and that's a concern I have with this concept.
Well, I'll certainly, be happy to and will engage with the superintendent and the board regarding this, just to take their temperature. And, they're a constituent. They should be contributing to the conversation. I also don't think they have a veto over it. I don't think their desires drive it, and I don't think their desires defeat an idea either. I think that the whole idea of certainly the global idea, which I don't think you disagree with, of pedestrian access and greater pedestrian access in the city as a whole is a positive thing that was well supported in our questionnaire to the city, to the residents. Let me just touch on that library issue that you bring up.
Mhm.
That was in the library, of course, in the survey was also, I think, the number 2 most popular asset of our community that people liked. And that's the new location. Now, when the county came to us and came to many meetings to talk about a new location for their library where it was, the schools were aware of this. And the schools had opportunity to weigh in on it. And I don't recall a lot of negative pushback from the school about it. I really don't.
No, it's.
I
very
remember
positive.
talking to them, it's very, I remember talking to them about the crosswalk issue as the project was developing. So I don't view that the library location was somehow
It was
Done
not, and I did not
at
answer
a-
why that.
at a, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That- I was sort of understanding
No, it's
comments
just,
mean that like we disregarded some expression by the school board where I
No,
thought
no.
they were actually, I thought the schools, I don't know if it was the board, the superintendent, but, it was well discussed. And I think this
Certainly.
needs to be well discussed
I think the
also.
piece that I was saying was not anticipated, and by the way, possibly between the library, I was not on the, that was predated my time on the school board by about a year, was
who would pay for the crosswalk. I think the school loves having the library there. It's always been an asset. It was previously just on the other corner of our campus. The library, probably one of my favorite places in the community. I love it there.
And now that
can't-
now that you're saying that, I recall, there was a disconnect between, I think, the library and the schools regarding the payment of that crosswalk. But that wasn't the city.
No, it had nothing to do with the city. I was using it, and I didn't want to impugn the city. I was just trying to not go into detail on how it happened, but I thought you might remember. My point was just that we shouldn't create a problem for the district.
No,
Or,
certainly not. And I'll have
we're
that
not trying to
conversation.
lead people onto the campus necessarily, or give students a path away. I actually talked regularly with a few school board members, kind of revisited this conversation with them. And I just don't see it as something that would be helpful to them at this time. Of course, I'm not part of the decision process, but the school board sets the policy, and it's actually in policy that they see riding to school as inappropriate or unsafe.
All right, well,
I mean, I could.
I'd love to have that conversation with them. I will. I may have, my own, they may have very good reasons for their policies, which they can express to me. And I'll bring it back to the city, of course, those conversations. But on the other hand, maybe some of the origin, they may have current reasons for the policy. The origins of the policy, when there was no safe pedestrian access to get to the school, may have driven some of those policies. And if there is more safe accessibility. Now, I'm not saying that every kid in the Orange schools are going to be riding their bikes up to Orange schools. Frankly, I think this is a more high school directed sidewalk than a
I'm just
younger
saying
child
that,
sidewalk.
only, believe me, half of the kids in Orange schools come from Pepper Pike. The other half do not,
Right.
though.
Right.
And currently, the rest of Pepper Pike with this project would not have those things. That being said, it's not my understanding that would be the only factor driving this policy.
And I can.
So, and this, we don't have to go into detail with it here. I still like to talk about the school policies, and I'm happy to do that at a different time when nobody
Okay.
else has to sit here and be
Yeah,
bored
well,
by it.
I will
but,
engage with them about it.
Yeah,
I'm committed to, I will engage with them.
And I agree, because I think decisions like this are going to have impacts beyond just Pepper Pike, and that being the school board and our kids there. I do have a current student, and I had to sign a waiver for her to walk to the library. So they're mindful of student traffic to and from, and who's allowed to do it. So I want us to be really broad with our thinking of not just it impacting Pepper Pike and their residents, but this is our schools are a shared asset with other communities. And I do know that our community, that the community that borders, that also shares land on campus, this was a recent discussion with their roads and safety committees, that there were some residents wanting a sidewalk there, and it didn't make it out of committee, that was abandoned, that they decided that it was not a worthy idea for that, because for whatever reason. But anyway, so I have some concerns. I was also just wondering, like, when was our last traffic study done on this circle? Like, I know it's been in the works for a while. I've only been on council for a year plus. So kind of what's the history behind this? And has any of that changed with the pandemic? I know, just going up to school recently, the traffic that I saw there years ago, that you would sit on Lander forever, things move faster now. So are we still looking at this through the same lens, our current lens, or are we looking at something that was done years ago, 2017, 2016? I don't know.
I'm going
Is
to
it-
let Don speak to this.
Sure.
It's pretty good accurate as far as when it was last done. We did a study probably in 12, 13, something like that. There've been a number of studies done, and then there was another study done when the Beachbrook property was up for sale. And then we had COVID, obviously, which changed driving patterns. And quite frankly, if we did a study today, I think it would still be impacted by the changes in, work from home policies and bigger employers that are still not all the way back, like a Progressive Insurance and things like that. So it's different. And we don't have a current number. I wouldn't necessarily run out and do a study tomorrow, because I still think you're kind of not going to have a true picture of how to do a good projection with the data you would get. But I think what you're trying to accomplish with the work at the circle would be to take whatever traffic's at the circle and just make it a safer circle, make it a better, an enhanced pedestrian access and a safer route for vehicles, regardless of the number of vehicles. Not necessarily trying to address backups, but just making the circle work better. And I think that that's still valid. Now, as far as the circle and work that potentially could be done there, along with developing the path, you're trying to pick the one intersection right at Chagrin, where Chagrin heads out of the circle, and trying to make sure that that's aligned properly. So, but the other intersections really aren't, whatever changes are going to be made at those intersections are going to be the same, regardless of whether or not there's a pedestrian way here or not.
And do we have to bring pedestrian ways that close to the circle if we are going to do it? Like here, we have those pedestrian walkways are close in proximity to the car. There's nowhere near as much traffic around Shaker Circle as there is here.
Right.
So have we looked at different ways to do it, that it's not up as close?
You kind of have to do it kind of close. You can't get too far back, because all of a sudden, okay, we're into somebody's parking lot with our sidewalk, or we're 50 feet away from the intersection. Great. Okay. A car's not going to stop 50 feet away from the intersection because they're not looking for pedestrians there. So you have from the vehicle is the driver of a car is anticipating, this is where I stop, and that is typically where the crosswalk is. So it's usually pretty close to the intersection.
Right.
And if you pull it 100 feet away, that's when somebody decides to cross, and the car coming up doesn't even realize, hey, there's a person that might just walk out in front of me.
Right.
So there's a reason why they are where they are, and we haven't designed this finally. So
Okay.
but so that's a work in progress.
Okay. Yeah. I think some input to that. I mean, because we're trying to retrofit something onto something current.
Right. And what we've done here, you create really islands of refuge as you cross. Like, I can cross part of the way, stop, check for traffic, and then cross the remainder. That's what typically happens at a modern roundabout or a modern traffic circle, is you put those islands in, so a pedestrian who might be crossing doesn't have to manage 3 lanes in one shot. You can get to the middle. Okay, it's safe. Okay, now I'm looking at cars from the other direction, and I can cross my last bit.
So to Emmy's point, I have had a lot of the same thoughts and questions, because I drive this way all the time, and during sometimes those hours, and traffic is at this point greatly diminished, it seems. And, so my question is it, it could go back, it could change, but is it ripe? Is it really something that we need to do? And I know that there were concerns about where the traffic is coming from. If the intent is to relieve traffic on Lander Road and Pepper Pike, where most of our residents are traveling, that's where the traffic seems so diminished. I can't speak to the traffic coming off of Chagrin, but I don't know that it's our community's priority to spend a lot of money to relieve that traffic.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that you're not necessarily relieving traffic greatly. It might be just a little bit better, but what you're trying to do is also make it safer, and you're also trying to create a pedestrian safe zone around the circle. You do have sidewalk coming up to, say, where the waterway is, that facility there, and it runs basically on the north side of Chagrin. So there are people that walk on there. When they get to the circle, they're in parking lots or running across wherever they're deciding to cross. which is not a great thing. So when it's all said and done, is traffic going to just zip right through the circle? No, it's still going to have to stop. There's still going to be some modest backups in each direction, but you're making that interaction with the pedestrian, with the bike rider, potentially with the motorist, a safer experience, and you're hopefully reducing accidents and side swipes and things like that out in the circle.
And that part I really appreciate, including the narrowing piece. I mean, and whatever pedestrian usage currently is there. The part that I remember seeing a previous design, and it concerned me because it looked to me, it wasn't very aesthetically pleasing. It was a lot of concrete.
Yeah, I really put a lot of value in the green space in there.
Yes.
And I would be very opposed to reducing that green space and getting rid of it. It
Well,
really adds a lot.
Yeah, the plan isn't to make the interior of the circle any smaller.
That's going to stay the same.
That's going to stay the same. What you're going to do is you're going to lose some of the 40-foot wide pavement sections that are around the perimeter. of
So
the
this isn't the 4-island one we had seen at one point, correct? There were like 4. Remember, there was a previous.
Yeah, that was,
That's okay. It's not that one.
So
Good.
you would shrink
Shrink the outside.
outer diameter
Yes.
in a little bit to
Yes.
make it more truly a one-lane-ish.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's really a 3+ right now, believe it or not. You see those 2 red cars there?
Yeah,
That's actually as tight as it gets, and I still think it's almost 3 lanes right there.
yeah.
You have some areas where it's 50 feet wide.
So
So
you would reduce it to 1.5 or something?
It's got to be 2, you know.
Gotta be 2,
Yeah,
okay.
but it averages 2.
The Chagrin entrance and exit, I'm fully supportive of fixing that, putting aside the sidewalk issue completely, only because there's 2 lanes entering onto the circle, and it always has created confusion about whether we have a 2-lane circle, and if you're a driver new, you think, oh, there's 2 lanes, because there's 2. I just
Yeah.
did that today.
Right.
Both cars went like this, right
Yeah.
onto that. So I'm fully aligned with fixing that into a 1-lane and not fooling drivers into thinking
Right.
it's a 2-lane roundabout, which
Yeah.
it's not. Other than that, I just want to be very cautious and incremental about these changes and
Yeah.
make sure that we're not making things worse.
Well, and we really have to we did some designs earlier on, and we really would want to make sure that we're meeting current design standards for whatever we're going to do. And a big part of the design would be if we are limiting that Chagrin Boulevard back from a 4-lane highway, as it technically is at that entrance, down to a 2-lane road, that changes that section.
And then the entrances you're thinking about eliminating, Huntington Bank is one, I'm assuming.
Yes,
The Huntington Bank entrance,
yes, that's
which is right there.
that's-
Which is this one
that's-
that goes right under the highway.
2 little arrows. Yeah, that is
That's
pretty
danger.
horrendous.
Yes, yeah. And what are the other ones that you are thinking
Well,
about?
go directly above that.
To Waterway,
No, to the left.
to that office building?
Yeah, that would be one we would want to take out. It doesn't get a lot of traffic, but
From here?
yep.
Okay.
And then the waterway, we would modify, but they would still maintain access. That's their
Okay.
business. If they can't get cars in and out, then we'd be buying a gas station.
Right.
I don't think we want to do that. And then skinnying down the entrance to the shopping center on the bottom right. Yeah.
This one here?
Yep.
Skinning it down.
To a single lane coming in off
Coming
the
in
circle.
Only.
Yeah. You don't need to have an exit there.
So you don't have that exit.
It's a
that
terrible
cuts
place.
Across the head of
Yeah,
Lander.
terrible place for an exit.
That's a very dangerous situation.
Do people turn left there from Lander?
Yes,
They do.
they're not supposed to, but they do all the
Yeah,
time.
and it avoids the
That's when they're going the wrong way on
occasional
the circle.
Wow.
somebody heading southbound on Lander makes a left to go in right there.
Oh,
There's another entrance
Really?
before.
Yeah, people do it all the time.
Right here, where, I don't know if you can see the little arrow there, but right there.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I don't think you can ever eliminate people doing those kind of
right,
inappropriate things. I mean, other than ticketing them.
right.
Well,
You're never going to totally
Yeah.
eliminate it,
Part
but
of it you can because like for the Landerwood entrance,
Mhm.
that would be an exit off the circle into the parking lot. So
You'd
it would be
eliminate.
flowing, no one would turn around and then you'd be driving direct. It'd be like going onto an off
Yeah.
ramp on a highway.
right now, if you
So
erase
that's
all
exactly
the,
Here, like this, that would be.
That would be the only
This would
way.
go away.
That'll go away.
Okay, yeah, so that would help.
If you eliminated all the paint currently, this is a huge, wide free-for-all. And guess what? There's not a lot of paint out there right now. So it doesn't function that well. You want to tighten some things up, get people to go a little bit slower, which lets more cars flow through there. It's not going to turn it into, gosh, I pulled up to the circle, there's never a backup. You're still going to have some backups, but they're going to be a little bit more efficient.
I don't- yeah.
And
Yeah, now that you're telling me it's not that earlier iteration with you know what I was talking about, those 4 islands.
yeah, well, we'll produce something before we get too far down the road and,
Yeah, that's
and bidding something out. So and we really, I'm sure we want to have conversations with the school board as far as what we anticipate here at the
I think it's
circle
a
and how
big
that
deal.
goes. And that's
Yeah, because I
and
really think.
yeah. I think at the time that we looked at, for what it's worth, at the time that we looked at putting this in 4 years ago, while Beachbrook, that whole process was in, members of the school board were very
No.
enthusiastic about it.
No, I was on the school board.
Okay, so they were against it? I didn't get that from anybody, but
And we don't need to talk about what
Okay.
happened in the past, but
Okay.
I would say that having kids bike to school is not a thought of,
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't spoken to everybody. I've only spoken to a few people and I only know what happened in the past, but the traffic piece and making
Mm-hmm.
sure this traffic is safer, of course, is a concern with young drivers.
Mhm.
So yes, that part.
They're not major accidents, but we did have one just yesterday where people pass each other because it's so wide, they think it's multiple lanes and it's not. And then somebody goes to turn out and they hit the person flying around them on the right side. It's a large space.
A very timely accident. Thank you, Chief.
Was that planned?
Well, Chief,
They usually minor, but they have.
Chief, didn't we have somebody going the wrong way there for quite a while?
I mean, usually it's intoxicated people that have.
I was going to ask if they were impaired.
All right, Kathy, you've been.
Oh, just a question. There must have been a reason why they put the 2 lanes off of Chagrin and going off of.
Yes.
What was the reason why?
predates the interstate highway system.
Okay.
And at the time, that was US Route 422. So
Uh-huh.
that was how you headed east to Hiram or wherever you wanted to drive. And they built this thinking there's going to be this huge influx of traffic. That's the main route into Chagrin Falls and points east, and it never occurred.
But
It
it's
drops
not-
down to 2 lanes, and the 2 lanes is plenty wide for the traffic volume, including the school campus and even some of the other development. And
But maybe like for games or something, or did the school park buses in the front or something
No,
to
no,
have
no.
2 lanes?
No,
No?
no.
Okay.
And it does actually create a problem when it
Yeah.
merges, I would
Yeah.
say. I would
Yes,
agree
there's a
with that.
safety issue with the
I
merge.
guess it does, especially, some people are more aggressive maybe than they should be when they're driving.
And the
You know,
speed
if-
limit used to be 55 on that stretch road.
It
But not
seems,
in the school
it
zone.
seems to me that listening to this conversation, regardless of the sidewalk aspect
Yeah.
of it, that the shrinking down, the elimination of the 4 lanes to the 2 lanes, just standing alone, has a lot of merit. From safety, from
Yeah.
traffic circle
It's a
consideration.
no-brainer, I
And
think.
we can have the conversation, going forward, is that going to be where, there's going to be a sidewalk or not, or other pedestrian access? But, the circle itself and the reconfiguration of those 4 lanes to 2, I think, I don't think anyone on the committee had any concern that had a lot of merit, and we should do that. The plan, the next one thing that we could do, now the improved pedestrian access around the circle, I think, alone again has a lot of merit to it, because otherwise, basically, we have a shopping district where you have to get in a car to go anywhere. And if it had access, I think would improve. I think would improve. One of the reveals on the survey was that the very small percentage of people who used Morgan Park like Morgan Park, but it was like 70% of the people, some huge number, aren't even aware of it. They didn't have a comment up or down. Because it's not something that they do.
It's not very big.
It's an acre and a third. It's something that is available in a wonderful spot if you're walking in that area. That, it's not a park destination type park.
Right. You don't get out of your car and drive to Morgan Park to.
Unless you want to see the beautiful pollinator garden,
Yeah.
then you might.
But
But
we
the,
preserve green space.
so
which
we
our
do
community
that. So
likes.
if we do the conversation at our committee meeting was if we do the pedestrian improvements around the circle, then would link to that first leg of Lander Road. You were there, you heard the conversation. From the circle at Lander and Chagrin going north to South Woodland and improve the pedestrian access way for that initial leg of Lander, which would get pedestrians up to South Woodland Lander. And then the conversation can evolve. Where do we go from there? Is it further down Lander? Is it up and down South Woodland? Where would that next segment be? But it would at least break us into this, giving us some pedestrian access on this very major artery.
I think we need to talk a little bit though about so what are we trying to achieve with walkability? Is it recreation? Is it destination? Kind of what are our goals, and then where are we going to place that? Because I'll tell you, what I buy at Heinen's or at Canute's or Play Matters, I can't carry home. I need to have a car to do that. so kind of, I think it's establishing the goals and then looking at where that's going to make sense for us to spend those dollars wisely and usefully for our residents in our community.
Well, I can comment to that to this extent.
Sure.
The city, it's not like we don't have sidewalks. We have sidewalks in the city. They're just limited in number and length. When we installed the sidewalk that extends from the Sterling Lakes entrance, going along New Brainerd and passing where Old Brainerd dives into New Brainerd, there's that little green, pathway to go from Old Brainerd there. I can say, and then the sidewalk continues up towards Eaton, down where Starbucks is. I've gotten a lot of, anecdotal, compliments from residents of Sterling Lakes, Eaton Townhomes, which is part of Pepper Pike. And also it's provided a pedestrian access for basically the entire southeastern neighborhoods that feed into Old Brainerd and provides them with pedestrian access up to Eaton. And they do use it. They may not carry their Heinen's bags home on it, but they do walk up and go to the stores at Eaton, to Starbucks, wherever, particularly in good weather. So that's what pedestrian, to your question, I view it as both those things you mentioned, both accessibility, just the ability to walk somewhere, as opposed to looping in your own little residential neighborhood, unable to step out onto the major streets safely. I think it does all those things, and that's why I fully support, the conclusions of our survey that on our major arteries, we need to provide better pedestrian access.
Yeah, your point's well taken. It says, how will they be used? And that's one example. Like, you're real nearby, you walk over for a cup of coffee, but if you live on Shaker Boulevard or if you live on Cedar, you're not going to walk for a cup of coffee, probably. But how will they be used? Or will they go around the block? I mean, it's worth thinking about because it will impact our design.
Network, right? You got to build a larger network of sidewalk
Right.
for all those neighborhoods eventually to have accessibility.
Well, and then that goes to a greater, overall plan. If we are looking at this, what areas have already, our infrastructure has been addressed that they're ready to receive a sidewalk or a walkable area. I don't want to spend dollars on a project on an area that then we're going to be tearing it up in a few years to do our next sewer project or to replace a main somewhere. I want to have some planning and foresight as to what the most logical steps would be in that. And I'm going to express right now, I have some aesthetic concerns with how this is going to look. I used the word retrofitting earlier, that we're retrofitting a concept into a community that was not designed for walkability. I want this, if we're going to go literally down this path, I want to have the best result and the most attractive impact that we can have on it. So I think that like this discussion, I'm glad that we're having it because I really want to go into this with our eyes open and having the best plan that we can.
And I think you're right. One of you said that used the word design, and I think that's a very important word and a very important piece of this. So this circle was an example. I had seen an earlier iteration. The design concerned me because it was a lot of concrete. It seemed very, it seemed like a really good way to move traffic, but it didn't look aesthetically pleasing and didn't look like it was at a level that would be appropriate and would be appreciated by our community. So I think whatever we do, wherever we do it, and it could vary from, say, Gates Mills to another location, it has to be done in a very thoughtful way that improves the aesthetic as well as the walkability at the same time. And I think that's doable. I just think that we need to make sure that our work is done with the detail and the detail in mind for the aesthetic as well as the function. And, if we have to take our time or speak to somebody who does design to get to that point, I would support that because I think doing it right is the most important thing. I don't think this is something that could be transformative in a good way or a bad way. And I only want to see it done in a very, very good way.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Deliberatively, incrementally,
Thoughtfully.
testily.
Yeah.
I would even, whatever an economic portion of a sidewalk is, it's not 5 feet, whatever that is, install one someplace, see how it looks, see how it's used, wait some time, and then proceed with others before launching a massive plan to cover the whole city.
I'm really glad we're having this conversation because, some residents have expressed that with the shaker circle and doing all that, it was a big surprise to all of them, even though there was a lot of inner workings in the city. And so I think it's great that we're talking about Chagrin and making sure that we're deliberate and doing a presentation for the residents to see it, absorb it, digest it, come here and speak to us about it. I think that's great. And I think there's an opportunity also to have a conversation about the Gates Mills Trail, even though, we know that we want to do it, but we also have to think about the aesthetics of it. And a trail can be 6 feet wide and still be ADA compliant. ADA compliance is a sidewalk is minimum of like 3 feet, but if it's 3 feet, you have to have spaces every 200 feet to pass, or you can make it 5 feet wide, and that's ADA compliant. So maybe that's a great place to start on Gates Mills Boulevard with a 5-foot sidewalk or a 6-foot sidewalk or something, a 10-foot aesthetically, we're trying to find a compromise with those people that don't like the concept of a sidewalk and those that do. And if we want to compromise and have a conversation with our residents, I think we have to have a little leeway on the 10 feet asphalt, because a 10-foot, you don't have as much maneuverability as a thinner, slimmer ribbon down the middle of Gates Mills Boulevard that would be aesthetically pleasing, but also serve the needs of our ADA community. So I think it's important to keep having this conversation. And I know that we've submitted for grants for the Gates Mills Boulevard, but we have to think about what's aesthetic for our community and what do the residents want, and we also have to think about the environment, because more impermeable surfaces are going to affect the flooding. It's going to affect global warming, which we all know. And with the survey, the residents want, to be green. And we have to think about the green space and preserve that. Someone said at the road and infrastructure meeting that the difference of 8 feet versus a 10-foot trail is imperceptible from your house. But that's not what we're talking about. I mean, 8 feet, 2 more feet of 8 feet is like 25% bigger. And it also costs more to build and costs more to maintain. And do we want to encourage a driveway down the middle of Gates Mills Boulevard where a car can go through and that wouldn't be safe for pedestrians? If we need a truck there, we have 2 lanes on each side that the truck can stop at, go in, do their duty and do their work and then come out. But I just think that we should have more of a conversation about the Gates Mills Trail because that's a big deal in our city and that's the start of the sidewalks and walkability. So I think we should be able to talk with that with the residents and invite them or let them know that this is going on.
Well, I'm a little surprised because I'm hearing, frankly, a lot of, I know, passively encourage, sure, we're going to do sidewalks here from council. But I'm hearing a lot of negative talk about the idea of walkability in Pepper Pike. And it's yes, I am.
How
And
did you hear that?
I have an opinion. You have opinions. I have opinions. I think that the survey was overwhelming, that people want us to improve walkability in Pepper Pike. I agree with Melanie's comments that it has to be deliberative. I agree with you. It has to be deliberative. I think that sooner or later, the government of the city has to recognize and engage that you have to take a step forward on the path. And you just can't be frozen and analyze things forever before you put in a 5-foot wide sidewalk down Lander Road from South Woodland to the Circle. This isn't rocket science to do that. I think it's, to your point, Jim, it's a way of seeing, does it accomplish good things for our city? Does it make people feel safer? I'm sure we'll get more anecdotal feedback from people. Gee, it's good, it's bad, we don't like that. But we have to be able to move forward at some point. And, those are sort of my thoughts about it.
But that's not negative on walkability.
No, I think doing something right versus doing something right now, there doesn't have to be a huge amount of time between it, but we want the end result to be really good.
Of course.
So if anything, I don't know if that was directed at me for the negative.
No.
Okay, because I didn't mean anything like that. I have always thought that proper planning prevents, etc. We want to plan this thoughtfully, methodically, so that, again, we have the best end result that we can have. So that's my stance.
And I would agree with that. I think being deliberative, doing things the right way the first time also. And I do think the aesthetic piece is important. So it's just some people, the function is only important. And to some people, the aesthetic is only important. I do not think we have that luxury. I think that we have to hit it on all cylinders if we're going to do that. And I understand that that is more work and might take a little more time. I still think we have to do it.
I agree with you. I don't disagree with you.
I know everyone here puts in the time and the work. So I just think this is an ethos for all of us, and it has to happen again here. That's just part of it.
And let me add to it. This is such a major change for Pepper Pike. I want council very engaged in this, not just the committee. So I need
Jim, I think
these
that's-
kind of discussions.
That's the whole point. That's why this was the beginning.
Scott brought this.
That's precisely what we're doing.
And I think this is fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you.
This to me is us functioning at a high level and really sorting through problems, problem solving, respecting the full community. I mean, it's trying to really problem solve the way I think we all believe.
Well, and I appreciate what you said about the school board, because that's an angle I hadn't looked at.
Yeah, and it's.
But I think, I will say this, I don't think there's any right way of doing it and any wrong way. And if we do something that doesn't turn out exactly the way we want, you have to kind of start somewhere.
Mhm.
In terms of the aesthetic versus the function, sometimes there are going to be compromises on both. It can't be aesthetically beautiful and not functional, and it can't be the other way
I
around
agree.
either. I'm sure when we see Don's proposal for how to make sure that the traffic goes a certain way, it's got to work. And if it's not exactly what you think it should look like, I think that's not going to work either.
No, you're right, but we
So-
have to try.
But excellent input from everybody.
Like, I think your comments about the traffic kidneys, I think they're referred to, that drive the traffic up into a lane and direct them out again. You know, if they're nothing but concrete or asphalt, I agree with you. I think they're going to look aesthetically unpleasant. And that was the situation we had for some time at South Woodland and Lander.
Yeah.
And, you know, over the years, what we've done, and through the efforts of our beautification committee and our service department, we now plant that with beautiful flowers every summer, so that it's not simply this, you know, barren kidney that is sticking out in the middle
No,
of
it's
the
nicely done.
intersection.
And Mayor,
And
I
think
remember.
that is the sort of approach that we should take to, you know, I think kidneys may be necessary to shrink down the outer circumference of the circle. That's sort of how you drive it, or create that reduced one lane type situation. But it doesn't have to be ugly. It can be done, you know, aesthetically.
Well,
Mayor,
and as long as we're not shrinking the inner circle,
No,
which
the
is
inner
green
circle.
space, because we are all, I know, committed, I think that's universal.
Yeah.
To preserving and maybe enhancing the
Yeah.
green space in our
Yeah,
community.
I've never had any conversation with anyone that we were going to shrink the
Okay,
interior
That's
circle.
great. And I mean, I think I wouldn't assume that because I think that's so universal on this console that it would be hard to imagine.
Yeah.
So,
well, I've looked at a lot of roundabouts. I've looked at a lot of traffic in my years. And it's amazing what you can do with good design. And as I remember when we put those things in at South Woodland and Lander, they were not good looking at all. It was, but it's possible to make that look good and accomplish both. So we have to accomplish both. But again, really appreciate the input on everybody's part, because this is how we get things done and this is how we take everybody's viewpoints. Because everybody can't think of everything.
It's,
Mhm.
yeah,
It's a
it's great
collaboration.
work. It's great collaborative work, I think.
Good conversation. Department heads, Carl, anything?
That's just a good example of our partnership with Beechwood and the modern camera systems that we both have. We had a male that was called in with dementia that was missing from his home, and officers searched the woods, the street, everywhere, couldn't find him. Once we got his info, and Beechwood was able to get a good picture of him off the B&B website. They actually found him with their camera system at Richmond and South Woodland. So we were able to go pick him up, take him to the hospital, and it was nice to be waiting for a dog to try to track and things of that sort. So just wanted to share that.
It's a partnership with Beechwood and the dispatch that operates from there that continues to be very beneficial and positive for us. Don, why don't you report on Sugar Boulevard?
Shaker is, actually, it's moving along good. All of the new poles are set,
Oh,
the
wonderful.
entire length of the project, so, and they are actively, First Energy is actively in the process of switching over the lines from, on the eastern half, from east of Lander.
Okay, so that's going to move the stormwater project along.
Yes, the west end is done. They're actually installing the storm work on the western half of the job right now, and as they finish that up, they're hopefully going to be able to roll over to the
Okay,
eastern end and work there.
okay. Do you think, just, I don't know, work schedule wise, by the time the work crews get to the eastern part, CEI will have completed its transition from the old poles to the new?
I'm
Good guess.
hoping that they will at least have a head start, maybe not be totally done, but at least have enough of the space where not only they, but cable and AT&T lines can also be switched over. Yeah, so that's the hope.
Can the lower utilities do anything until CEI goes?
Nope.
They have to wait.
Yeah, physically, they're taking their wire, lifting it over the pole that's 2 feet higher because they've cut and then they stick it on the new pole.
So the top layer.
So the
has
top,
to go.
yeah, so they have to kind of work their way through because they're not replacing those wires. Those 18, there's like 5 or 6 huge AT&T conduits that carry everything. So,
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
but they're marching along. So we're cautiously optimistic that we're going to keep cruising along here.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
I think we're going to be salt and wall roads more, Jim?
I don't think so. We did go around, just completed last week on Friday or Thursday, I believe. We went through this whole city picking up branches after the 3 major windstorms we had. We kind of put it out there. We did a week and a half or almost 2 weeks of branch pickup, which was probably 30 yards of brush a day, chipped brush. That's 2 truckloads a day. Which will help, but and we told everybody we're still in May, like as scheduled, but this was just a bonus. So kind of got a lot of branch chipping done.
I've nothing to add to the conversation from the mayor's report today. Council, any other comments?
I just had a really nice call. I wanted to let everyone know from a community member who became ill while riding their bicycle and I guess basically passed out. Was so complimentary of our police, fire, EMS, who responded apparently very quickly because community members actually reported it. So thankful to community members and their response and how kind they were, and even later bringing back the bicycle. They just were so appreciative and thankful to live in this community where, you know, the response time was great and people really cared. So I said I would pass that along. They were really grateful. So, thank you to all.
Just a quick, circling back to a couple of things from last week's audience comments. I think it's great that we're building out, everything here. They were asking about winterizing the bathrooms. One question I had, are the bathrooms open now at the park?
Yes.
And then,
That's my better judgment today.
are we going to explore winterizing the bathrooms since we're, thinking about doing the trails and things like that in the area, and people need to be able to, enjoy themselves and also be able to relieve themselves. So is that something we can explore?
We've looked at the winterization of the facility in the past. Council, when it was originally built, constructed, determined that it did not want to winterize it. Things have evolved in that time. We don't have any sort of pricing. It would be a pretty major reconfiguration, and I don't know, we can look at it. Like I said, we would, think about and consider it, but it's for the use involved in the winter months. I know the one gentleman came last week who wanted it done. I don't know if the demand for that bathroom in the winter would justify.
I mean, you could put
what
one of
that
those heaters
expense
like
would
you
be.
do in the garages where it heats up at like whatever degree.
Yeah.
It turns on with gas, and it might be enough to put a small gas heater to a natural gas line, because I think that would help prevent freezing of the pipes. But I don't know. I would leave it to our service.
We have, since last week, I've kind of looked at a few things, yes. And we've tried to just determine when we built that, was the water line deep enough? And that's the big thing, because the water line runs from the fire department over to that building. And we think we did, but we're not sure. And I'd hate to blow the whole thing apart.
Right.
And have to dig in the parking lot to try to figure out where the water leak is at.
Can we put a
Because
second?
if it's not deep enough, it'll freeze. The ground is only so
Right.
warm and only so deep.
Right.
And the way it comes out of the building, that's where the discussion is it below a frost line? And the frost line is currently 36 inches. So that's a big thing. There's no insulation at all in the building. So if you start running the heater in
I
there,
see.
you're gonna be heating exposed walls. The way it was designed was not designed to be heated in the winter. So the pipes are not in a truly insulated area. They're on exposed walls, which all these things add together
Right.
create problems for something that's
Or maybe we could get a really,
retrofitted.
really pretty porta potty with a little outside
You know,
thing. Who
that's,
knows?
so that's the thought process
Okay.
behind it, but, you know.
Okay. And then the second thing, I had residents ask if there was any way to share the presentations like tonight on the YouTube, because when the Cuyahoga survey was presented, they couldn't see the TV screen. So I don't know if there's a way to do that in the future. Or maybe on those meetings that we have presentations, maybe we could do a Zoom, and then that way you can share the screen easily and not have to have some fancy AV. But I don't know if we have a capability of that, because that would be nice for
Okay.
audience members.
Okay. We'll turn to audience comments at this point. Does anyone in the audience have a comment? Yes, ma'am. When you,
Peg Horenick, 29300 Shaker. I have two questions.
sure.
The sewer system. And I think I came in at the end of the discussion, but,
Can you talk a little bit louder? I can't quite hear you.
okay, I'll try. The part that we are being billed for, that can go on our property taxes. When do we apply for that? Are we going to get instructions through the mail or anything on how to do that? Second is the sidewalks. Where is the money coming from? Are we gonna get hit with that again as we are with the sewers? Or how is that, and who's going to maintain them when they're in?
To your last questions, I can address that. Any sidewalks that we do, and we've talked about this in committees and in council before, and it's certainly my inclination, that is an expense for the design and installation that is borne by the city. There would not be an assessment or cost to the individual property owners. The maintenance is on the city. It is not on the property owners either. To your other question regarding the timing of the assessment, Mr. Brzezinski, you want to address that?
We have to assess it to the county by the first Monday in September. Prior to that, letters will go out to all the affected residents and offer the opportunity. We had a couple on Gates Mills that didn't want to be burdened with it being on their property taxes. They paid lump sum. They didn't get assessed. So if you don't come in and say, I want to pay 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, you don't say anything, the whole amount will get assessed to the county, and it'll start the first half of next year.
20 years, Joe?
20 years, 40
20.
payments.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Tamara Rennick. Am I supposed to say my address too?
I'm sorry, say,
It's Tamara Rennick, 31350 South Woodland.
hi.
Just hello to everyone. Just to clarify the maintenance on the sidewalks, and I'm a little confused because I thought we were doing a survey. I didn't realize it was a done deal. And I think I'm not the only one in the community that has that perception. So I sort of feel like it's being slid in without an open forum discussion. This has been a back and forth discussion for years. I grew up in this community and I still live in this community. So it's just sort of a recurring theme. And being that I live on South Woodland as a major artery, it seems like the people that want the sidewalks don't live on those streets. And it's concerning to me, who will be responsible for, you said the maintenance won't be responsible of the property owner?
No.
That's if the sidewalk cracks or crumbles or whatever. What about snow removal?
It may not, right now, there's no snow removal of the right-of-ways, and they're probably I'm not anticipating probably snow removal of a sidewalk that doesn't even exist yet, but right now, I'm not anticipating snow removal. Council may eventually have a different view that they want to or not remove snow removal, but that again is not on the resident.
Okay, because that puts an unfair burden on people that are having the sidewalk and would have to pay for that cost. 'Cause
No,
clearly, I'm not in a position. to
I
do it myself,
agree with you that we're not going to put that on residents.
especially if it's not sidewalks everywhere and everybody has to do it.
You're exactly right.
So,
You're exactly right.
okay.
Anyone
I
else?
also have aesthetic concerns, very much so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Grace Barber, 33,000 Shaker Boulevard. I agree with Tamara on a lot of her points. I personally, we bought out here because there were no sidewalks and aesthetically it was pleasing. It was more rural. That's not the reason we bought out here. So it's kind of disappointing again that it's being kind of shoved on us, being on a main street. I would like to walk on a side street. Would those side streets have sidewalks? Not necessarily because it's a side street, maybe not a lot of pedestrians, but people are going fast no matter where you are. I mean, they're not paying attention, they're on their cell phones. And then the second question with that circle and changing the circle, when was that designated ever as a single lane circle? I mean, I grew up in this area, grew up in Beechwood, moved here to Pepper Pike. You know, I've never known these circles to be single lane circles. It's always if you were going all the way around the circle to another street, you followed the inner side. And if you were turning off, you got to the outer lanes and turned. So it's kind of confusing to me.
You know how to drive a circle.
Well,
You know how to drive a
why aren't
circle.
you teaching kids this then? You know, it's
Adults.
yeah, I mean, they taught us that in driver's ed, you know, and no offense to the police department, I think they do a great job. I've never seen the police department on that Chagrin Circle telling people, and even the intersections at Lander and Shaker, the intersection at Lander and South Woodland, no one waits their turn. I mean, if there was police presence, maybe people would follow, you know, the guidelines on how to drive a circle or how to, you know, wait for a stop sign and not just because you have a yield, you don't have to yield to the car that is coming if you can speed up and get through. Just a couple questions regarding when was it ever maintained as a single lane circle?
I think it's ever been, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's ever been designated as 1 lane, 2 lanes, 3 lanes,
Maybe some.
most to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I think what we're talking about is a safety issue by and large.
Yeah, but isn't traffic gonna back up then, even worse? If you have single people waiting?
No, actually, I am advised actually not by the engineer.
Don, could you explain that whole concept?
Sure. What happens now is people often travel 35 miles an hour around the circle. You can do it. It's not that hard to do. The problem with people traveling that speed on the circle is that it's really hard for somebody else to pull out into the circle. And really, even though you may use it as a 2-lane road, there's a lot of people who treat it as a 1 really wide lane road. And there are no stripes to indicate that are more than 1 lane. So it is striped for 1 lane, whether you use it that way in practically or not, technically, it's a 1 lane circle. There is a 2-car entrance at Chagrin that 2 cars often come out there at the same time. And then things get, people that are used to it, but people that are maybe not familiar with it, they're not from the area, or they're a new driver or a very old driver, there's some confusion, there are issues. So if you can slow the vehicles down, it's counterintuitive, but if the vehicles slow down, more cars can actually enter the circle in a given time period because there's adequate space to judge when the car's coming around. If you're sitting at one of those intersections and somebody's coming at you, maybe in 1 lane, maybe in the process of switching over to the other lane, not using their signal, and then you're trying to pull out, you're going to wait. And that is what happens right now. So the idea is if you can slow cars down a bit on the circle, have them have to commit to making that turn to get into one of the, to head north on Lander or south on Lander or whatever, then you have an opportunity to get another vehicle out, and that is occurring at each of those legs of the intersection. So by tightening things up a bit, you can actually, and slowing vehicles down, you can actually get more vehicles through the circle in a given time period. And that's really how it's done. That's why roundabouts, they're starting to become more popular. This is actually too big of a piece of geometry to make it a roundabout, as some of the newer ones that you sometimes see in some of these intersections. It's just too big of a space, and because of the 5 legs that go into it, you can't shrink it. Even if you wanted to scrunch down that green space in the center, there's too many legs coming into it, and it wouldn't work. So it's kind of the shape that it is in terms of that interior circle, and then you really have to control those ingress and egress points around the perimeter.
Is there an optimum speed?
It's probably somewhere between 15 to 20 miles an hour is what you're shooting for. It's a slower, it's like driving in a parking lot where everybody's kind of driving a little slower. You have more reaction time, and more vehicles can fit in the circle.
Okay. Yes.
Pooja Kamath, 4510 Monet Place. I want to say 2 things in particular. We live in Sterling Lakes, and we often use that sidewalk to go to Eaton, and because of that in the summer, especially buy at Eaton, I go to Trader Joe's and actually carry all of my stuff home in the stroller. Or my husband will bring the 4 big bags, and we actually love that, and I would use that at Hyman's as well. My second comment is, as you guys consider where to put sidewalks now and down the road for the long-term plan, I like the idea of making a plan for the city, proposing it, build one, see how it works, and tweak the plan, but be thoughtful. I want to make sure we're thinking about using this space that's meant for residents of public space. We have our beautiful park, we have all of our events here, which you guys have seen me and my family, and we come to all the meetings, all of our cultural festivals and movie nights and things. Being able to access this as a family would be wonderful. And if we could put sidewalks or consider it on Old Brainerd to Shaker, I think would be something important for the city to think about. A lot of residents don't use this park or don't come to this area. And this is meant for the community to meet and gather. We don't have a community space that's like a big community center. We have this. And I think this would be used more if we had that. I know I would. And Sterling, as we talked about as a neighborhood, we have a play group that we do. Right now it's 15 families, and we meet at the park on the same weeknight every single week in the summer and the fall and the spring. And all of us would say we'd love to bike here together, but we don't because we don't have the sidewalks. Just to think about that as you plan for the future. It's not a major intersection. There's no shops down this road, but I think this is meant for the residents. And we'd like to have more access to it if we could down the road. Unintended.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Was the big U9-579 occasional boulevard, talking about the circle at Lander and Chagrin, which has been a pet peeve of mine because what pulled me into the city that actually screaming and kicking, but that's another story, is that the company I work for rented out this base in corporate circle there, and it drove me nuts that, and I didn't know the history of the circle, but somebody would design something where you would have an office district and a retail district, and you could not walk in between them. I mean, that is not good business. I think what it is this. Of course, I didn't realize how it evolved historically, but I think whatever else is done with sidewalks, the need for safe traffic and safe pedestrians at that circle is long overdue to be addressed. And I would like to see something done with that, regardless of what else is done with sidewalks or paths in the city. I think as far as the aesthetics and paths, everybody has their own sense of aesthetics. Now to me, if you put the asphalt in the middle of those boulevards, whether it's 6 foot, 8 foot, or 10 foot, you're just talking about incremental ugliness. Okay, to me, it's just not feeling. But everybody, sense of aesthetics are different. Some people will see a big difference between the West, so when you come to aesthetics, it's strictly an opinion thing. There's no way you can analyze it, determine it. It's what people like or don't like. And no matter what you do with it, you're gonna have that issue. The lady was saying on sidewalks, one of the big appeals when I visited this city is it had mailboxes on the side of the road. It had no sidewalks and it had no street lights. And so it had that quasi rural nature to it. And to me, again, no matter how you design a sidewalk, it aesthetically, to me, it's gonna be ugly. Other people will say how you design it might make a difference. But again, you're probably gonna get as many opinions as there are people. Actually, you'll probably get more opinions than people because there will be somebody who can't make up their mind.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, you stand adjourned.
Sidewalk.
So you think